did not lose a game during the elimination rounds, and his deck really did influence what Brian Braunduin put together for his Grand Prix win at New Jersey. And now here Rudy is yet again 9-1 with Obzon Reanimator.
Rudy has definitely put together a string of results recently, and I think more and more people are respecting him as a player. I think he's still flying under the radar as a deck builder, but he built a very influential Legacy deck. As you mentioned, winning the Legacy Open and then having a heavy influence the way Brian Braunduin constructed his Grand Prix winning deck.
Davis starts off with an island and a copy of Evolving Wilds, so he will sacrifice the wilds. We'll see what land he would want to search up here. Perhaps it's time for a Plains, as Briksza's off to a pretty slow start. Davis going to go with an island, but Briksza's draw here, never really fires out of the gate too quickly, does Obzon, but what it does do is very powerful things.
Absolutely. Now, this is a Whip of Erebos-based strategy. We've seen a lot of the 4-color builds that have gotten away from Whip. This is a more classic build, and of course, all the graveyard stuff, Sylvan Caryatid, Sim Wayfinder and so forth. Try to get stuff in the graveyard, and then get it all back with Whip of Erebos.
Davis without a third land, so just 2 islands here for him. Pharika will be cast. Davis going to take a long look at his hand at this point. He's got a couple counter spells over there, Nullify among them, and he will use Nullify to take care of Pharika, as it is a creature when it is on the stack. An island there for Jim. And now a passing of the turn. Briksza draws a forest. He'll play it in an offensive, or at least try to. See if Davis wants to counter this. Looks like the answer is yes. There's a dissolve. Perhaps that smooths out his draw. Top card going to stay on top there for Jim. A Temple of Malady there for Rudy. Top card goes to the bottom. Jim draws a copy of Temple of Enlightenment. Top card now will stay on top. And these players are just humming along.
And one of the incentives for Jim to build this deck is this kind of matchup, where Rudy only has so many cards in his deck that really matter. So counter spells are very powerful here. Dissolve especially.
Top card of the deck here for Rudy is a Whip of Erebos. Force going to come into play. Trigger the Courser. A little bit of life gain. Pass the turn back to Jim. Jim will draw. And he will find an Evolving Wilds, which of course he knew was on the top of his deck, so he will play that. Evolving Wilds deck, a card, excuse me, we don't see very much in Standard, but the reason for that is because he wants more ways to put stuff in the graveyard for his dig through times.
Yeah, it's a concession to the dig through time, and I'm surprised more decks don't do this. For example, the White Blue Heroic deck could probably fit in 1 copy of Windswept Heath, and a lot of those decks have Treasure Cruisers either in the main deck or in the sideboard.
Here's 9 Autumn Blossoms. So we'll see if this does resolve. The thing that's really tough about these Obzon Reanimator decks, and Obzon in general, is they can keep up on cards with blue-white control. You would think that blue-white control will out-card a deck like this, but that's not always the case. Briksza going to draw Siege Rhino off the Eidolon. Top card now is a copy of Sylvan Caryatid, and it looks like we're going to head back Davis's way. Davis will sacrifice the Wilds. You have to imagine a Plains here.
So there's a couple things going on about what you just mentioned there. Yes, the deck can definitely keep up in terms of raw card count, but there's a card quality issue. Blue-white control has more powerful stuff going on. The blue-white deck is better at keeping the Obzon deck off of its critical pieces than the other way around. And there's a dead card advantage issue here as well, as Rudy's going to be drawing removal spells or creatures that only generate mana and so forth over the course of the game, and Jim doesn't have the same burdens.
See Dig Through Time play a huge role in this game, but Evolving Wilds is what helped facilitate that. That was the 4th card in the graveyard. Let him search up his 5th land, and then he's able to cast Dig Through Time for 4 mana. So Evolving Wilds certainly worth its weight in this game. Even though it's a little slow out of the gate, more cards to give to cast what is arguably the best card in Jim's deck.
And there's a lot of sensitivity for colored mana. He needs double white pretty early on. He needs a lot of blue mana for dissolves and nullifies and so forth. So even though it's not the smoothest mana fixer, the graveyard synergies you just alluded to, plus the fact that he just needs more mana fixing, even though he's a 2-color deck.
And Jim has found 2 cards he's happy with. The other 5 will go to the bottom, and he'll take a draw step. Divination among the cards in Jim's hand right now, and Hostilities as well. That's what he's trying to set up.
Yeah, and this is an interesting thing about Jim's deck. He has so much card advantage and so much card drawing that this looks like a board where a player might panic and say, I got to get this off the table right now. There's Eidolon Blossom, he's going to draw so many cards. But really, the only thing that Rudy's going to put together is more creatures. And so Jim can let him draw some extra cards off this Eidolon if it comes up, or put some lands into play with Courser, cast his Jace's Ingenuities and so forth, and then clean it all up with End Hostilities. He's in no rush to sweep up this board, even though it looks pretty threatening.
And Jim, one thing about him when we watch him play, a master of using his life total as a resource too. We're in the draw step there, so Jim got the information the top card of Rudy's deck is a land. So that's why you saw the hold up there for just a moment. Last Breath will take care of the Courser, so the draw for Rudy next turn will be a copy of Llanowar Waste. Siege Rhino's been placed onto the stack. Davis looking at a Divination in his hand along with 2 copies of Jace's Ingenuity. It's also a disdainful stroke there as well. Jim may be considering using Disdainful Stroke on this, but he also knows that Briksza does have a copy of Barabos in his hand, so perhaps he's better served using Disdainful Stroke on that. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, that's the play pattern he would ideally like to execute here, is use the end hostilities to keep all the creatures in check and use Disdainful Stroke on the whip. But I think he wants to fire off Jace's Ingenuity as soon as he can, and so he needs to keep the board pretty clean.
It's time for divination here for Davis. 2 cards coming. 1 is a Stroke, 2 is a Devouring Light. There's a Radiant Fountain, gain a little bit of life back, and those lands, they play a big role in this deck.
Of course, especially when you're just trying to get to the point where you are casting things like Jace's Ingenuity and Dig Through Time. All the life you get, there's more breathing space to cast those cards and more space to give you the time to deploy the cards you've drawn.
It's a Rhino. And the Rhino's going to be in this time, as Jim did draw Devouring Light, his one of. So he can let that resolve and then have the ability to remove it. Now, of course, what he's trying to work his way towards is Jace's Ingenuity. He wants to start drawing 3 cards and actually bury Rudy under his card advantage, and Jim will draw a card. One thing to keep in mind, too, about Jim's deck, 27 lands here. A lot of lands. So, you know, we saw him kind of put some lands on the bottom with Dig Through Time, but the chances of him drawing a land is actually pretty high. So that's probably a good decision.
And I think what Jim will probably try to do this turn is fire off the Jace's Ingenuity, use the Disdainful Stroke on something threatening like Whip of Erebos if that comes up, and then untap, play the end hostilities again with Disdainful Stroke back up to check the whip or some other large play from Rudy.
Jim had the ability to Devouring Light there. Elected not to, and this is part of the reason why. He wants 3 more cards, so he's going to draw 3 of them. Jace's Ingenuity will resolve. Again, one thing that Jim does very well whenever you watch him play blue-white, he uses his life total as a resource very, very well.
Yeah, and part of the reason he can do that is the lands that you just mentioned, the Radiant Fountains and the Tranquil Coves, give him a lot of cushion.
Looks like it might be time to end a whole bunch of hostilities, and it is. So there's the Wrath with a 3 mana available. Not the first time we've seen him do this. Dissolve and Disdainful Stroke at the ready. Hornet Queen the draw there for Briksza. Here's Anafenza. See how much Davis cares about that, but he is staring at a Devouring Light, so I can't imagine it's too much. Here's a Sylvan Caryata, and that'll be Rudy's turn to reload. We're going to go back Davis's way. Tranquil Cove the draw. That'll come into play. Trigger gain a little bit of life. He's going to go up to 9. And happy to pass the turn back over to Briksza. Briksza will attack here with Anafenza. And it is time to Devour Light. So there that goes. Here's Thoughtseize.
Thoughtseize is important. This may allow him to get this Whip of Erebos into play.
Wouldn't be surprised to see Jim dissolve this at all. Has 5 mana available, so he can dissolve plus cast Disdainful Stroke. That's what we're going to see him do. And let's keep in mind, too, a little scry action here. And hostilities will be the top card. It'll become the bottom card. Now there's the whip, and absolutely not. Can't stroke it fast enough.
A great turn here for Jim.
Yep.
And that was a great turn in spite of Rudy drawing perhaps the best card in his deck in that spot, which is Thoughtseize.
Negate is the draw. You might be wondering, is that actually a main deck card for Davis this weekend? It is, just 1. Now here's a Hornet Queen. Davis will have a response. It's Jace's Ingenuity. 3 cards coming, probably looking for some sort of counterspell. And hostilities will work just fine too. Dig Through Time, that's probably not too bad. Probably still responding to Hornet Queen with Dig now. And it's going to be a 2 mana Dig. Rudy assuming it's a Nullify, and it's not. Jim's still searching for an answer, perhaps.
No, it's just more card drawing.
Yes. What's so fascinating, and we mentioned this yesterday when we watched Jim play, he's the only one doing this sort of thing. No one else playing blue-white control. Jeremy Bylander kind of put this deck on the map when we were at Minnesota during season 4, getting 2nd place at that tournament. And Jim has really taken that deck and that performance from Bylander when we were in Minneapolis, and he's run with it.
Yeah, the control decks in question that we see are almost invariably blue-black control, and I feel like even Esper is probably more popular at this point than blue-white control. Speaking of blue-black control, congratulations to Adrian Sullivan, PTQ winner.
Yes,
back on the
blue-black
PC.
Control.
Yep, blue-black control.
One of his goals of the year, and he accomplished it very early. Dissolve will take care of Hornet Queen. We're going back Jim's way. Jim will draw another copy Dissolve. This game's getting very, very tough for Briksza.
I mean, this has been just a smooth, efficient game from Jim. He's broken serve a lot mana-wise, using 2 mana to exchange with 4 or 5 mana from Rudy on a bunch of turns. Rudy's last card in hand is a Murderous Cut he can't really do anything with. And Jim's drawn so many extra cards.
Now here's an Elspeth. That's the way he wants to win this game. That's the way he's going to try to win it. Soldier Token time. Briksza will draw a card. It's a copy of Corsair Crucifix. We'll see if Davis cares about that one at all. Davis will consult his hand. Reclamation Sage is on top of the deck. It's actually picking up some useful information as there's a Last Breath, as Briska's going to concede the game. So Jim Davis is going to win game number 1. Gets a little info out the door, which means Reclamation Sage is a card he has to be wary of as he is playing 4 copies of Banishing Light, but a big win and a good start here for him.
Yeah, that was, I mean, we rarely see Jim win that quickly. And that's because the game was so straightforward to play from his side that there wasn't much complexity going on there. You can see why Jim likes this deck, particularly against the Abzan and Sultai matchups. There's just not a lot of cards that matter. Most of them that do matter are very expensive and therefore line up very poorly against Disdainful Stroke, Dissolve, and other counter spells.
Well, you have to imagine he's been here before in this sort of matchup against Abzan in different capacities, you know, be it this version with Reanimation and Whip of Erebos, be it just a mid-range version, but that's part of the appeal of playing the deck that he's playing.
Yeah, and once you get out of the first couple turns of the game and you've resolved your Jace's Ingenuity, you've hit them with an end hostilities, they do have cards in their deck that are still, you know, powerful in the abstract, but even cards like Courser or Crewfix, you don't have to care about anymore. There's not that many cards left in the deck that you have to really worry about, and so you can be really precise with your counter spells and removal. That is exactly what you saw that game. Once Jim was able to weather Rudy's first storm, there weren't that many cards he could bring to the table that would change the outcome of the game, and Jim was able to pick those apart very easily.
Well, it is sideboard time right now, and so we will take a look, and we'll start with Briksza's side, as he'll be on the play for game number 2.
2 copies of Erase 3 Glare of Heresy, an Ajani Mentor of Heroes, an Abzan Charm, a Reclamation Sage, a Nissa Worldwaker, 2 copies of Thoughtseize, 3 Bioblights, and an Eidolon Blossoms. I like that there's some cards in here that are just well suited for playing against control decks. Eidolon Blossoms, the additional Thoughtseizes, the Nissa, I think those are very easy to bring in. And then the Abzan Charm for additional card drawing. The Ajani Mentor of Heroes, much the same. I don't think that he really wants to play Glare of Heresy or Erase because those are a little too specific just to fight Banishing Light. But I could see the extra Reclamation Sage coming in because at least it's a body on its own and could be really powerful if it happens to catch a Banishing Light.
And we'll take a look at Davis' sideboard, very reminiscent of what he's been playing for the past couple of weeks at that Season 4 Invitational where he made the top 4 and at the Players' Championship in Roanoke. A Fate of Retribution, 2 Omen Speakers, a Last Breath, 3 Bramaz, King of Oreskos, 2 Negate, a Whelming Wave, 2 Erase, and 3 copies of Glare of Heresy.
So the additional removal spells, I really like the 3 copies of Glare of Heresy. I think the 2 copies of Negate are pretty solid here. The additional Last Breath, as Rudy has both Eidolon Blossoms and Courser Crewfix, and the Fate of Retribution. Rudy's trying to build up a pretty big board. Fate of Retribution can be really powerful there.
And there are some Planeswalkers running around in Rudy's deck as well, so a little bit of a splash damage there from Fate of Retribution.
Most of these Abzan decks, if they're not playing with Planeswalkers in the main deck, there's at least some in the sideboard to help out in the control matchups, and Rudy does have Ajani and Nissa to that end, so even if Rudy didn't have Planeswalkers, I think Fate of Retribution would still could be reasonable, and the fact that most of these Abzan decks go to some number of Planeswalkers means I think it's pretty certain Jim's going to bring it in.
Well, these players will finish sideboarding up here for game number 2, but while we wait, we will talk about the fantastic Magic comic and cardboard crack paperback books, now available.
3 paperback books and have been extremely well received thus far. The whimsical black and white comic strip about Magic the Gathering, available at starcitygames.com/cardboardcrack, or your copies a day. All 3 copies on sale for $12.99 a piece.
From what I've heard, a 4th book may be on the way.
Would not surprise me. The content's generated very quickly. As you see in the bottom right-hand corner, the Matthias Hunt stick figure looks very similar to his emoticon on Twitch.
That looks like Matthias to you?
Well, the facial expression's pretty similar.
Just need to get a hat.
Not the stick figure.
Okay, yeah, you need to clarification is key in what
Right.
we are doing here. That is just a person plays Magic.
The Matthias emoticon is what I'm saying.
Gotcha.
Just happy to be playing Magic, happy to be hanging out.
Yeah. And who wouldn't be? Jim Davis certainly is. He's off to a beautiful start this week at number 3 on our Open Series leaderboard. And part of the reason he came here, again, he wants to qualify for the Players' Championship. The points right now where he stands on the leaderboard, he's got a real shot at this thing, and he knows it, and he's looking to take advantage of it. Long Island is not close to Columbus.
Neither is New Jersey, which is where Rudy's originally from, although I believe he lives in the Baltimore area now.
Yeah, which is a little bit closer. Still no short drive.
I don't know if that's actually closer.
I think it's a touch. I'm not
It's
probably
real close. It's probably within an hour.
I've made the drive from Ohio to like DC before, which is GC and Baltimore, like the general same area, and it's about 8 hours. Back in my old PTQing days. I actually made the drive for that Team Grand Prix that you got second place at.
DC?
Yeah.
The Northern Virginia, but
We got 7 into a van. It was uncomfortable. I was in the front seat. Played perfectly. Here's a Thoughtseize. We've got 1 dissolve, 1 nullify, and a hostility, along with a whole bunch of lands here for Davis.
this hand's, I mean, Rudy's got a couple different paths he can take here. You can take the Fate of Retribution and try to just 1-for-1 here. We can take the Nullify and try to break out with a fast Anafenza. What's nice about this is, Jim is without double weight, at least for the time being, and no card drawing spell. So Rudy may be able to play a 1-for-1 game.
Hey, it's going to leave him with End Hostilities and Dissolve, along with the 4 lands, 2 deltas, 2 islands. Nullify's going to bite the dust. You see Rudy's hand there. He does have Abzan Charm along with Anafenza, so he's definitely got a route to go down. As we're going to head back Jim's way. Jason's Ingenuity the draw.
I mean, Anafenza, even though this is not a matchup for Anafenza, a 4-4 on the play, it's going to be hard for Jim to answer. He doesn't have a ton of answers.
Yeah, still hits hard.
He's got his Banishing Lights, the Devouring Light if it's left in his deck, which I'm skeptical of, and the End Hostilities, but that's pretty slow to the party, and that's the kind of game Rudy wants to play. Force Jim to tap out on his own turn for a threat that's really not that significant. That can open up the window for Rudy to resolve things like Siege Rhino, like the Nissa in his hand.
I'd be a little surprised if he poured it out, the Devouring Light. It's just a one-of, but the fact that it does exile seems to be a pretty big deal here.
That's a fair point.
Davis will draw, copy of Tranquil Cove.
Significant, as it's a second source of white mana.
There's an island to be able to cast Dissolve. Utter end of the draw here for Briksza. Here's an attack for 4. Davis going to go down to 16. Temple of Malady will be the land that Rudy does play. Top card becomes the bottom. And he's passing. Davis will draw, copy of Disdainful Stroke. There's the Cove, up to 17. Here's Abzan Charm. Do wonder if he has any interest in countering this.
Probably not. I imagine now Jim's trying to just protect his life total, get into spots where he can resolve his card drawing, and then again, kill or sweep up the Anafenza while leaving up counterspell mana. It's going to be hard to do. He's under a lot of pressure.
4 more damage going to come across here. Davis down to 13. Pressure backed by Disruption. That's the plan here for Briksza. Does have a Thoughtseize, just going to wait.
I think he contemplated maybe just running one of his 5-mana Planeswalkers into a counterspell to get it out of the counter out of Jim's hand. But Rudy would ideally like to wait for land number 6 so he can Thoughtseize and follow up in the same turn.
Yeah, I prefer this method. Here is Thoughtseize. However, because Davis has 5 mana right now, the play of Dissolve plus Disdainful Stroke is available, which is fortunate here for Jim. Jim going to give this a long thought. And he will cast Dissolve. Now what's tough here for Davis is if he had kept that card on top and Rudy plays a 4 or 5 mana threat that is worth Disdainful Stroking, you'd actually have to leave the card he kept on top. So I was a little surprised not to see him sacrifice the Polluted Delta in that instance before casting Dissolve, but things worked out okay for him.
Yeah. Especially since that Polluted Delta is committed to getting an island. I suppose because of the Urborg in play, he can just leave it there.
This is true. This is true. Here's an Ajani. Be surprised if this resolves. Oh, it's tough because I imagine that Jim wants to Disdainful Stroke this, though he really does want to resolve that Jason's Ingenuity too.
Well, I think this is okay for him because now he's in a position where he gets to next turn have 7 lands in play, which affords him the opportunity to cast End Hostilities with Disdainful Stroke back up.
If he has a 7th land.
Yeah.
Which he does.
Yeah.
Yep, he's got a Delta, so that play is open.
I mean, I'm sure he's not thrilled to end Hostilities away just this lone copy of Anafenza, but he's at least got the path set up.
But this feels like what he's been working towards the entire time, right?
Exactly.
Which is this exchange, which, end Hostilities 1 creature away is not the sexiest thing in the world. Is now here's a Thoughtseize. That's a pretty big game.
Yeah, this is problematic now for Jim big time, as it's a path for Nissa to resolve.
Yeah. Jason's Ingenuity's got some real work to do now. You see Briksza's hand, Hero's Downfall, Utter End, Hornet Queen, and Nissa. And Nissa's going to be coming in. It's going to make a 4-4, pass a turn back. So we're going to go back Davis's way. He's at 6. Jason's Ingenuity is going to have to get some real work done now. That Thoughtseize is very, very timely there from Briksza.
I believe that's number 3 this game, and they've
Yes,
all been
it is.
really important.
Nullify, Last Breath, Glare of Heresy. Not the right combination of cards. Tranquil Cove can bring up to 7, but 7 is not above 8, and that is going to do it for this game. Abzan Reanimator in the hands of Rudy Briksza ties it up against Jim Davis playing blue-white control. Nissa very powerful in this matchup.
Yeah, the 1 copy of Nissa, the 1 copy of Abzan Charm, the sideboarded Thoughtseizes, they were all important in that game.
That third Thoughtseize is a backbreaker because Jim had set up everything the way he wanted to do it.
Yep.
If there's no Thoughtseize there, Rudy casts the Nissa, Jim disdainful strokes it. Now he's moving into, all right, now Jason Ingenuity, and perhaps a repeat of what happened in game 1.
And Rudy's leftovers at that point were a Hornet Queen he couldn't cast, an Utter End, and a Hero's Downfall with no targets in play. So Rudy's hand past that Nissa really had very little going on.
Yeah. But Tommy top deck there for Briksza, and that's how we're headed to game number 3 here. Both players will get ready for that game. Maybe change the sideboard up a little bit. While we do wait, we will talk about something that Jim Davis really did take advantage of to qualify him for the Players' Championship, and that's the Star City Games IQ series. We've got 2 IQs running right now, actually 2 Premier IQs taking place. Those are our 5Ks, and we got 1 Modern and 1 Legacy happening right now that players are doing battle in. But IQs can really be kind of anything you want them to be at your local store.
Yeah, they're just an opportunity to play more Magic or a path to qualify for the Invitational. And for a lot of our players, it was a road alongside the Opens and Invitationals to qualify for the Players' Championship. All these tournaments, the prize kits we send out come with playmats, dice bags, pins, and SCG Premium vouchers. And if you're looking to bring IQs to your store, you can contact the Star City Games Organized Play Department and get these set up today.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. I mean, you get a bunch of different stuff. Sometimes we switch out the pins and different things and free premium and all that stuff, but it's more play. You know, we've got SCG Game Night, which is more of a fun type thing that we're doing, but this is more of a competitive one as well. We've got regular IQs, super IQs, premier IQs, whatever you want to run. Just get in touch with StarCityGames.com/organizedplay for more information. And for Jim, and for some other players too, Kevin Jones, these were integral for them heading to the Players' Championship
Gerard
last year.
Fabiano,
Absolutely.
Wise.
Yeah.
Even winner Brad Nelson probably would not have qualified if it were not for IQs in the Virginia, North Carolina area.
And Brad actually split the finals of an IQ yesterday.
With the sideboard's own Nick Miller.
Nick Miller apparently still has it.
Yeah. Dude, Nick Miller mixes it up.
I know. He likes an infect deck. I don't know if he can play green-white in this format. I doubt that you can, but I know he likes a green-white strategy.
He battles a lot on the weekends.
When he's not working, he's definitely battling.
Yeah.
I can appreciate that.
I very rarely do.
Well, you're just kind of like, I kind of want to insult you, but I don't think I'm going to.
Okay.
It's
Well,
just-
you already have by leading off the
just-
conversation that way.
You got to get back out there, man. You got to take those weekends and cast some spells. That's all I'm saying. It feels really good when you don't get to play as much anymore, and then when you go play, it's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed my Friday night Magic over the break. Little white-blue heroic action.
Yeah, you got to get out there. You know, there's a Monday Legacy tournament that's like 10 minutes from my house that I try to go to if I get back in time from flying back from the events. I got to play one of those. There was like 40 people. It was actually really awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
If you have a thriving scene like that,
Yeah.
you know, the store by my house, you know, we get 20 for FNM, but if it was draft, I would show up a lot more often, but constructed is just, you know, I just don't enjoy it as much. What can I say?
You just got to get out there and battle. I mean, I'm going to the Grand Prix in Cleveland to see my parents and do battle. It's limited. I just can't wait to first
I
Grand
don't
Prix
know.
in
There's
Cleveland
so
since
many-
2002.
There's so many books to read, and there's a jump shot to be worked on. There's a lot of things taxing my time, you know?
Working your way towards the D League or whatever it is you're striving for.
The F League.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Certainly not the NBA. But hey, whatever you want to do with your time is up to you, but it doesn't mean I can't judge you for it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. Get out there and cast some spells. Someone needs to learn a lesson about how to play against a red deck.
Why's that got to be me?
That's kind of your calling.
No,
Kind of your
it's.
job.
I mean, no, it's not. I mean,
Think about how much you furthered Ross Merriam's career after that devastating loss.
sure. It was great. It was
Without that, Ross may not be the player he is today.
great from a storytelling perspective. It's like Rounders. Protagonist takes a huge shot in the beginning of the movie, builds
Yeah.
his way back up, and then redeems himself.
Hopefully with better writing, though.
With better writing
Okay.
and better acting.
Okay. Because the writing and the acting in that movie is horrible.
It's not great, but whatever. It's still a classic.
Oh, I own it.
Yeah.
On DVD.
I still quote it ad nauseum like every other gamer out there,
Yeah.
but it's not very good.
They should make a new one.
Rounders 2.
Yeah. Mark Wahlberg tried that kind of with The Gambler, except for it is horrible. So that didn't really work out very well. ESPN tried it with their show Tilt.
Oh, wow. I remember that one.
It was very bad.
That was a doozy.
Very, very bad. Davis taking a mulligan, looks like to 5 here against Briksza. I think there is a market to be had for a Rounders-esque movie right now with proper acting and good writing and a good storyline.
I don't know if that's true. The poker thing is just not, it's not as popular as it once was. Maybe a daily fantasy sports rounders could be really.
Oh, hello.
Maybe there's a market for that right now.
It is pretty hot.
Yeah.
Though I don't know how in-depth that particular.
Right. It would
movie
be
could
hard
be.
to squeeze 90 minutes out of that,
Yeah.
I think. But that's why there's people more talented than me that come up with plots and,
That's
and
their
writing.
job.
Right.
If a movie like Battleship can exist, we can get this done.
Battleship's kind of a sweet concept, though.
That is the world's worst movie.
It's the world's worst movie.
That's
but
the
it's a
one.
Sweet concept. There are battleships. Sweet concept. I'm on board.
A tranquil cove to start here for Jim. Sansa Citadel for Briksza. Jim does have a couple of lands to work with, the Banshee Line and a negate, so.
I mean, the land drops are the most important thing because if Jim is able to make his land drops, he has a bunch of very good draws. And Rudy's deck is likely to give him a lot of time to draw out of it because outside of Siege Rhinos, he doesn't have that much that applies quick pressure.
Yeah, you said it, not a lot of quick pressure. Just a passing of the turn, so Jim can play a little bit here. Now, Rudy's hand is pretty good. You see the Obs on Charm, 2 copies of Siege Rhino, and a Nissa over there. So he's definitely got some very, very powerful spells that Jim has to respect all the way across the course of the game. But Jim can play a little bit of Magic here, and that's really all you can ask for, I think.
If he gets to Chase's Ingenuity or Dig Through Time, he's got a real shot. His deck is very good at pulling itself out of mulligans, even mulligans to 5.
There's Obs on Charm. That'll resolve. 2 cards coming here for Rudy. Ilana Blossoms among them. Farika the draw. This is a Courser. Jim will take a look at his hand. It's going to resolve Utter in the top card of the deck, and Briksza, I don't think he has a land. That's a big game here for Jim. This will give him the opportunity to get back into this one. And if Jim's able to peel off something like an End Hostilities here,
Oh, yeah.
knowing that my opponent's not going to draw a land, this could get very, very interesting. 3 copies of End Hostilities in his deck. Also has different answers to Courser, too. Let's see what he's able to draw here. Banishing Lights. Flooded Strand going to be used right away. He's got some fight left in him here. On a mulligan to 5.
Rudy has a
Rudy expecting End Hostilities, but that is not the case. There's Banishing Light. That'll take care of the course, so we're going to head back Rudy's way.
No, Jim's going to get a little bit more out of an End Hostilities there.
Utter End. Will he let this resolve is the question. Does have a copy negate in his hand. Kind of an interesting situation. Top card's now Thoughtseize, and that one's the tough one. Back Davis's way. Faded Retribution, the draw. Interesting. Radiant Fountain's going to come in. There's Banishing Light yet again. Pass a turn back. Thoughtseize the draw. Here's Ilana Blossoms. Briksza desperately looking for a land.
Would not surprise me here if Jim's entire plan here is just negate for Thoughtseize and Faded Retribution for everything else.
Mm-hmm. Top card stays on top. Now, to Jim's credit, he does need another white source of mana to be able to cast Faded Retribution.
But Rudy's likely to give him a lot of time.
Ooh, Dig Through Time's a big one.
That's a huge draw. And with the amount of mana he has, it allows him to negate a Thoughtseize and cast Dig Through Time.
Mm-hmm. Windswept Teeth the draw. This is going to be a very interesting game now. There's negate for the Thoughtseize. You mentioned that was probably going to happen, and it did. Briksza going to attack here for 2. Davis is going to go down to 20. Life total very high. Rudy looks like he wants to play a Siege Rhino, and he does. Jim looks at his hand, says that's likely good to go, and it is. So Davis going to go down to 17. Briksza going to gain a little bit of life to 21. There's Windswept Teeth. Pass the turn. Time to dig. We got ourselves a game.
Yeah, for sure. This is the thing. As long as Jim's mulligans to 5 contain land, he's got a shot because he has so much card drawing and so many powerful spells.
Yeah. Now, what you take here with dig is very difficult.
With Fated Retribution in hand, I'm a big fan of a counterspell and a card drawer. That's the mixture.
He's looking at Jason Ingenuity and a Temple right now. Ingenuity will be more cards. Fated Retribution cleans everything up. And of course, Temple Lightman's the third source of white mana. And also, Fated Retribution is a card that people just, it's not really a card that's on your radar when you're playing against a sort of deck. So, you know, it might be a situation where Rudy feels like, okay, well, I can play around hostilities, I'll play a Planeswalker, and that falls right into what Jim wants him to do.
Exactly. Taking the Temple here is perhaps a bit more conservative than I would like. I think that in Jim's seat I would take Dissolve plus Jason's Ingenuity, but I can respect just wanting to lock up the extra white source of mana.
The draw for the turn was Dig Through Time. Radiant Fountain's going to go to the bottom of the deck. After Jim, you're just hoping that no Thoughtseize comes off the top. Nothing that can pick apart your hand. Here comes the Rhino and the Eidolon. And all Jim wants to do on this turn is says, hey, just do something that doesn't hurt too much so that I can cast Jace's Ingenuity. A Freak is a little scary.
This play is nice for Rudy for a variety of reasons. It is an Eidolon trigger, and it is a way to advance to the board without playing that much further into a sweeper.
Well, it would have been an Eidolon trigger. He did not remember. 3 cards coming. And those are his triggers to remember. That's big for Jim, him missing that.
Yep. Because you can see, I mean, Rudy's got 4 cards in hand, but this is going to come down to a battle of attrition.
Yes. Every card matters in this situation. The only way for Jim to get back into this game is he needs every card.
And he doesn't even have to pull the trigger on Fated Retribution right now. If
No.
he plays a land on tap, for example, he can Devouring Light the Rhino and Jason's Ingenuity again. If Rudy adds more to the board, great. That all gets swept up by Fated Retribution. If he doesn't, Jim's got a lot of breathing space. So.
Yeah, if Rudy's turn is something like play Nissa, thinks the coast is clear, make a creature a land, try to attack, then Fated Retribution comes down. Here's Tranquil Cove. We'll go back Rudy's way, force the draw. Couple of lands here for Briksza now. There's the attacks. Again, Jim an expert at using his life total as a resource. See if he wants to make a move here. It looks like no Devouring Light in hand just yet here.
He doesn't even have to make a move on this attack.
Yeah.
He still is fine. And he has a Radiant Fountain left over in hand.
Here's a Rhino. It's getting more difficult.
The Freaka is an element of, it is a challenge here for Jim. As long as Rudy leaves up some mana, even if Jim has a sweeper, Rudy's going to be able to get some pressure into play.
Yeah, the big thing here is, you know, Jim has copies of Erase
Yeah.
that he can find, Banishing Light too. So he definitely has some cards that he can use to get himself out of the situation. I think Jim right now is kind of asking himself, do I want to Dig Through Time or do I want to Jace's Ingenuity? Which blue spell do I want to play, and how can I get as much as possible with this Fated Retribution? Because if he Jace's Ingenuity to a card like Erase, for example, he's probably doing okay.
Yeah. Although, again, this is starting to become an issue of mana as well.
Yes. 3 cards coming. And hostilities among them. That one might be pretty good.
Because the Fated Retribution is a big commitment of mana.
Yes. Nullify the Rhino. Keep his head above water, he will. Though this opens up the door for Whip of Erebos. Though he will not cast it.
I think Rudy does not want that to get hit with Banishing Light. I think he also wants to keep it as a surprise.
Okay.
Because it represents lethal now with a Siege Rhino in the graveyard.
Yep.
There's a risk there for sure, but
There's a huge risk there.
I think Rudy wants to keep that in his hand as a surprise. The other risk now is if he gets hit with the sweeper, he doesn't necessarily have enough mana to whip and activate in the same turn.
Yep.
He goes down to 7. So there's risks. There's a lot of risks for Rudy's line of play there.
Radiant Fountain's going to bring Davis up to 8. He's reaching for mana. Looks like he's going to end some hostilities here. Okay. So Farika's going to make a creature. And now Farika will make another creature. And for Jim is hoping not to die. Oh, Thoughtseize is big.
Yeah.
But I think Jim has, this is interesting. Nullify, dig through time. Whew. That's really tough.
Yeah.
Because Rudy also has that copy of Nissa in his hand too.
And that Nissa is lethal.
Yeah. Oh, no, Nissa comes up short. He's at 8.
Oh, he's at 8, sorry. Forgot the Radiant Fountain.
There's a dig. So Jim's going to look at 7, take 2 with him. Elspeth among them. Also a copy of Dissolve. Banishing Light 2. He's going to take the 2 white cards in Elspeth and Banishing Light. The rest are going to go to the bottom. What he's doing here is he's making Rudy have a very difficult decision with his choice.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of quality cards in this hand.
See, Nullify, Faded Retribution, Elspeth, Banishing Light. A lot of options. There's Nissa. Attack him for 6. Davis is going to go down to 2 here. Faded Retribution's out the window, so he's got to do a lot in one turn to get himself back into this. End Hostilities isn't a bad start. Something like End Hostilities plus Banishing Light on Nissa gives him a shot.
Yeah, it's multiple cards at this stage.
Divination of the draw. That Thoughtseize was huge there by Rudy. And Jim was trying very hard to set up Faded Retribution, but never found a window to cast it in.
Yeah, I mean, that Thoughtseize came at really the last moment.
Yeah.
I think Faded Retribution could have done a lot of work. And it's possible Jim could have been a bit more selective with his dig through time as well, had his hand not been forced by the Thoughtseize.
Yeah, perhaps.
So now Jim's got to think about what is the mixture of cards I need to be able to win this game? Do I even have the luxury of casting Divination?
I'd be surprised. He's running it through his head on what he can draw to get himself out of this situation, but Rudy's coming at him from so many different angles right now.
Exactly. His hand is likely a dead end, so he has to cast the Divination, I believe, because I don't think his hand offers him a solution.
Yep, there that is. Delta, Plains, those aren't helpful. Yep, that's going to do it. Rudy Briksza is going to win this match here over Jim Davis, 2 games to 1. Abzan Reanimator will take care of blue-white control. An untimely mulligan to 5 there for Davis. He's able to claw his way back, but Thoughtseize, Farika, the Planeswalkers, what Abzan does comes from so many different angles, and that's what makes it so tough to beat.
Exactly, and a lot of that has to do with the post-board configuration, too, with Rudy just having a lot more substance. Nissa was incredibly important in both the games. The Abzan Charm is really powerful. Those are only one-ofs. And, of course, the Thoughtseizes were a huge deal as well.